Hello, I am Maddie Dalrymple, the indie author, and welcome to the Mining the Movies with TropeTalk video series, where we discuss what writers can learn from the tropes used in movies and TV. And my co-host for these events is Jennifer Hilt, the author of the Trope Thesaurus. Hey, Jennifer, how are you doing?
Good, good. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. And we are also joined by Roland Denzel, the indestructible author. Hey, Roland.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, we always have fun on these. So, just to give a little bit of background, the live events are open to patrons of the indie author and past podcast guests. And the next one is going to be the 2011 movie Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy with Gary Oldman, Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Firth, Tom Hardy. I don't know how I missed this. And John Le Carre himself makes a cameo in there. And we'll be examining the tropes of ticking time bomb, hidden identity, secrets, violence, and MacGuffins. And that is going to be on Sunday, January 7th, 2024 at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you're watching this video on replay and are not yet a patron and would like to join us, please head over to patreon.com/the indie author, and that's indie with a Y, and you can explore membership options, which start at $1 per month. And today we're going to be discussing A Christmas Story. And so here's a summary of the movie just to get us in the right frame of mind. Based on the humorous writings of author Gene Shepard, this beloved holiday movie follows the wintry exploits of youngster Ralphie Parker, who spends most of his time dodging a bully and dreaming of his ideal Christmas gift, a Red Ryder air rifle. Frequently at odds with his cranky dad, but comforted by his doting mother, Ralphie struggles to make it to Christmas Day with his glasses and his hopes intact. And I brought one of my 3 dogs, Griffin, because I couldn't resist this.
Oh, yes, that's awesome.
It's actually made for one of her bigger sisters, but she's going to look out the window. I'm not doing this. She says, I'm not doing it.
I won't do it.
There.
Great.
So that will make sense to everybody who watched the movie. And just as a warning that we're going to assume you all watched the movie, so they're going to be spoilers galore. And as we talk about the movie, I'm going to ask our participants to consider 2 questions. What was something you liked about the movie that you would consider modeling in your own work? And what is something you didn't like about the movie that you would avoid modeling in your own work? Griffin thinks that's very boring. And since our focus is on tropes, Jennifer, what are some of the tropes we are going to be looking for in A Christmas Story?
Let me just start to say that I love this, and I hadn't watched this movie. I don't think I'd watched this movie again since I had like redone all this trope stuff. So it was super fun to watch it and to see like, oh, there's so many ones in there, but they're so organic to the story that I wasn't watching and going, oh yeah, this is this, and that. So that was really pleasant to watch because as we know, some tropes are there's more, it's like how you twist it and add it and develop it. And I thought that Gene Shepard just did a really great job. And I know in addition to writing the book, he worked with the screenplay of this. And so I could really see like, oh yeah, it's not the same when you do a movie as in a book. And I just was like really appreciative of how the structure of this went. So I just wanted to say that. In terms of tropes, there's I guess there were a couple ones that I loved, and a movie that deals with holidays always has a ticking time bomb because you always have that holiday event that's going to be the thing. And it's really important if you are writing like any kind of Christmas story that it really culminates with Christmas being the high point of it, because in talking with some students and working on stories like that, it's really important that it doesn't occur like in the middle of the story if you're creating a Christmas story. So just kind of a thing to keep aware of, because you can certainly write a story and have Christmas in it as part of it, but just kind of what people want with a Christmas story is for, in general, the whole thing to culminate with that actual event. So that was just something that I thought they did a really great job with this, obviously, but I appreciated it more looking at it from that kind of perspective. So they made the ticking time bomb just like so integral to the story, which I loved. And also the whole MacGuffin of his Red Ryder BB shotgun. And that was just a perfect way of a kid's Christmas gift thing that he wants. Nobody wants to give it to him, as they keep telling him he'll shoot his eye out. And yet it was just a great conflict for the whole story, because every time he tried to like make a step forward, he was repelled, and then a couple steps and then repelled. So we can talk more about kind of how that happened, but just kind of these very base tropes were really well embedded in this story. And the other one, let's see, MacGuffin.
Oh, can I just ask something or make a comment about that?
Yeah.
That The one thing that I thought was weird, and I'd never noticed this before, I've watched this movie many times, and like every line of dialogue pretty much is quotable, but I felt like I almost wanted it to end with him getting the air rifle.
Mhm.
Like the fact that then, like, he gets the air rifle and then, then he does kind of shoot his eye out. Not really, but and then there's the whole the Bumpus dogs show up and eat the turkey, and then they go to the Chinese restaurant. And I felt like it was a little disappointing. Like
Mhm.
everything before that was so just one quotable thing after the other. And so I kind of wanted the MacGuffin to be like you were saying with the ticking time bomb. I wanted that to be the resolution of both of them, I guess.
Right,
And I'm
right.
curious about the thoughts of both of you on that. Well, I put the dog down.
Yeah.
You
Roland, do
should
you
never
wanna
use that. You should never say put the dog down.
Yeah. Especially as we're talking about
I know.
Put the dog on the floor. And
There
she's
you
very
go.
upset about it.
Um, I agree. I agree with you. I watched it and I thought, oh, I felt like it already, and in my mind, like things went in a different order. Like I've seen the movie many times before, and in all honesty, I used to hate this movie. Like it's like people would want to watch it and be like, oh, can't we watch something else? It's like, like I didn't love it. And for some reason people loved this, and like movies like The Sandlot, I put that in the same category. Like I don't love The Sandlot either. But so many of my friends and family love The Sandlot. And I felt like the story was, yeah, like I wanted it to, like I don't mind the extra stuff, but I feel like he should have got the BB gun, and then maybe he used the BB gun. Like maybe he could have used the gun to like try to fight off the dogs or something like that. Or his
Yeah.
father said, no, we don't actually do that to dog. Like whatever, like
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. There should have been some sort of a lesson, and then really quickly wrap up with the turkey's ruined. Let's go out to and have Chinese. And then
And it's,
I feel like it could have just ended at the Chinese restaurant too. Like it could have just been like they could have just got together and then they're eating and they're having a
yeah.
happy dinner there, and then it could have faded back out and there could be the snow in in the windows of the Chinese restaurant.
Yes. I would have liked that ending better. And even the way, I think it was Gene Shepard who actually did the voiceover.
Yeah.
And even the way he read the last line, I was watching, I was like, that's weird. They're like running credits. And are they going to be running credits over whatever the really last line is? And then, even though I've seen this many times before, it wasn't the last line, but just his intonation, it was like he was about to say another sentence and then it wasn't like that wrap up kind of intonation. So yeah, Roland, I like that idea that I wish they had just sort of faded out on the dinner in the Chinese restaurant. Jennifer, what do you think about that?
I think that I have seen this movie many times, but like I said, this is kind of like looking at it with fresh eyes. I don't think in our current storytelling mode that the Chinese restaurant scene plays well. And I think, like when because this I forgot when it came out, like so long ago. It was
1983.
Yeah, 83. And I didn't blink an eye about that at that time. But now when I watched it, I was like, ooh, cringe.
There are a couple of cringeworthy scenes. That one and the one where the mom's on the phone with the neighbor who Ralphie is accused of swearing.
Yeah.
Those are both like, can we just fast forward this? This is like a little
Why
creepy.
was that cringeworthy?
Well, you could hear the mom hitting the kid in the background of the telephone conversation.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Okay.
that wouldn't, or like even the dog's ear getting shut in the door. Like there's some things that just wouldn't happen if this was being made today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
But
I agree with you about the Chinese restaurant. Like I think they still could have done the Chinese restaurant without all the stereotypes, because it is still a common thing, especially in a lot of big cities where, if you, like if you want to go out to dinner on Christmas, you're going to go to a Chinese restaurant, right? And so they could have done that, but without the
Singing.
the Chinese turkey part, right?
Yeah.
Like the hatchet, the lopping the head off of the goose.
I didn't mind that as much because that felt more like a dig at the family than it did a dig at the at the restaurant.
Well, I thought it was funny. I just think in today's day and age, like people are so hypersensitive to like where food comes from. I guess that like that might be sort of an issue. But I just the accents when they were singing, I think was the problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I was thinking of with this movie, which is like interesting and slash problematic, where you kind of fall on the whole thing, is it was really, it's kind of like a time capsule in terms of like so many things. Obviously I didn't grow up like way back then, but just kind of like this, I grew up in a household that was similarly structured, where it was like, everybody kind of tiptoed around the dad, and there were just certain, you didn't mess up in school, and there were bullies, or it was like it showed a structured time that's, I think, very different than now, and it certainly romanticized that in a lot of ways that we don't. I'm glad that it's not exactly like that, but I also kind of just enjoyed seeing something different and I kind of liked that like time period piece of it. And I think that's kind of like, and the way it gets away with that without being too dated is that it's really rooted in the relationships of the family and with Ralphie, because otherwise I think if it wasn't, it would be easy to discard, and it wouldn't be something that people would watch. You wouldn't tolerate the scene. It's the kind of racist, violent scenes if there wasn't something that at least made it okay. I can give them that because I get this,
Yeah.
kind of. So it's
I think,
interesting. Yeah.
I think that when the movie came out, it was
Mhm.
very obvious that it was supposed to be old fashioned. So you knew that it wasn't realistic. Like it was, those things were exaggerated. But I think enough time has passed that people don't realize. Some people probably think that's really how it was,
Yeah. In
or how it
1983.
was. Yeah, yeah.
Or even,
No, but in the
right.
when this took place in the
Yeah.
50s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
I could
So
see
like,
that. Yeah.
yeah, you're both too younger to know father knows best, but those, or
No,
read the
yeah.
beaver, but like
I'm
it's like, like those
is that
things were,
yes.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. And even the scene of like, I thought the scene was interesting where that whole thing with the bully scene was very interesting, how that was handled, and would be obviously handled in a very different way. And even just the fact that, they had to run that gauntlet twice a day of the alley was a great way to use conflict in the story. But I think like such a really a time capsule about that, and that it would not be viewed in the same way. But it's interesting of like, and the mother was like, kind of covers up for him. And he said, oh, things were different with my mother and I from that day. And you're like, you get this kind of soft, tender moment. But then he goes back to plotting for the gun, and he's like, kind of
Yeah.
moved on like that, as children do.
I have to say that one of my favorite scenes in any movie is when the mom brings milk to the brother who's hiding under the sink. I just love that.
Yes.
And then when he really has to come out, and she kind of goes like this to make him come out of
Yeah.
the, but I think that is just so done in such a lovely way. Jennifer, any other examples of the relationship tropes that they use?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, I was thinking about in some ways, and in romance a lot we talk about enemies to lovers, and then but I think that trope can be applicable to a lot of relationships that don't necessarily have to have kind of like this sexual nature to it, because and I guess what I'm trying to say is I think in some ways Ralphie had an enemies to lovers trope with his mother in a if I can say that, in a non-sexual
Yeah,
way.
I know what you mean.
Mom and I, after that time, I came to appreciate her, and they just kind of so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I guess it's just a thing I think is helpful to keep in mind as writers, because you can also have, and it wasn't an example in this, but I love it when it's in mystery and thrillers, lovers to enemies. So like that's just a trope I think that can get flipped around a lot and used. And obviously that part wasn't used in this, but I just wanted to mention it because I see it everywhere. And I think, it can do a lot of heavy lifting in a lot of ways, as opposed to just kind of like this very set way that you might think of it as in just like a rom-com. So, or a romance, I should say. So anyway, I just kind of like that with him and the mom. That
And the enemies, the lovers to enemies, is there an example of that you would pick out in this story?
In this book, I mean, in this movie, no. I'm just kind of throwing it out there for something to think about, especially, I guess, for the next movie that we're going to watch. But because like I say, I often see it in mystery and thriller. Somebody who's like a close friend turns out to be an antagonist in a different way. But it's not really, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there for
Mr.
the.
and Mrs. Smith.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, something like that. Or like a lot of times in horror movies, like The Stalker turns out to be somebody the person knew.
Got it. Yeah.
in a different way. So anyway, just kind of those were the kind of things I was thinking, but not so much in this movie. But and then this isn't really a trope, but it was something that I really appreciated in this movie is how much mileage the actor who plays the dad got out of that newspaper. I was like, wow, he uses that as just a really great prop of like his emotions and feelings. And I just was, I hadn't thought about that before, but I was like, really, it was just kind of fun to, and we don't really have newspapers in the same way now, so it was kind of making me think of like, oh yeah, that was a really clever use of that to show some family dynamics. So
It was nice because it served a couple of different purposes, one of which was when the mom is deflecting attention. Like, I also really like the fact that she didn't lie about Ralphie having gotten in an accident, but
Yeah.
she described it in such a quick and innocuous way, and then she immediately directed the dad's
directly
attention to
did that.
something. I think
Yes.
it's something in the newspaper, which
Right.
I just love that whole bit. That whole bit with
Yes.
although I have to say that the one thing, and I'm seeing it sort of at least from my own experience, I'm seeing something that comes up in every movie, which is like expectations versus execution. And so we've already talked about a couple of these things where there's this sort of weird juxtaposition of like funny, not funny, but the one thing that always surprises me is when Ralphie is beating up Scott Farkas
Yes.
and he's clearly hitting him in the chest. And then you see like Scott's nose bleeding and stuff like that. And I thought it was kind of unnecessary and jarring because you could have just had Ralphie like pinning Scott to the ground and, hitting him in the chest or in the shoulders or something like that. And then the mom comes and pulls him off and, Scott's like upset because he's been beaten up without the blood. I thought the blood is both weird and also like an odd consistency thing because I never saw him get hit in the face.
I hadn't even noticed that. But I always notice the blood on the snow.
Oh,
That's the
interesting.
part that always gets my attention. But that's a really great, that's a really interesting, great observation. Never thought it. What I liked about that scene was where he's beating him up. The little toady guy says, "I'm going to go tell my dad."
Yeah.
And I was appreciated the kind of irony of that.
Well, did anybody see any other of those examples where like you kind of raised your eye thinking, oh, I thought the movie was going to be such and such, but now I'm surprised to see such and such? Any other examples like that?
I was a little surprised by his fantasy dreaming scenes. Because the movie seemed in a strange way realistic to me. So like when he has where he thinks about the whole scene where he's his theme and the teacher's going to read it and he's going to, and she does the A+ all over, which I loved, and all the, the kids pick him up. That was like, oh, okay. And then he has this like kind of the daydreaming sequences of where he like saves the family with the from the criminals who climb over the fence. That seemed a little like, oh, a little jarring to me until then they progressed. I'm like, okay, we're going to have these in the movie. And then the other one would be where he goes blind from his soap.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Those I wasn't thinking that those would be in the movie, or, I was not really thinking there would be this kind of fantasy element, but but then I went with it. But I was like, okay, is this an interesting way to inject some other storylines without having to go full throttle into them?
I didn't have that same feeling about the dream sequences seeming odd because it seemed of a piece with the rest of the sort of, it all felt kind of like a dream, the way he set it up, like, oh, looking back on the idyllic days of my childhood. And what I liked, and I'm setting this up in contradiction to the Scott Farkas bloody face scene, is when he would shoot the bad guys, he always shot them in the ass. And they would still fall down dead, but it was like, yeah, that's the way a little kid would think about that. Roland, you were having a thought about the dream sequences?
Yeah, I just thought they seemed too goofy in relation to the other stuff. So like I didn't really mind that he had the dream sequence, but it's just like the way that the guys were like, like shimmering, like doing the
Yes.
weird things.
Yeah.
I thought it was too much for I felt like it was out of balance with the tone of the movie.
And I also guess, is that something like, I don't know, how old is Ralphie supposed to be in this movie? Would you guess? Like he seems older than a kid who would have that kind of very cartoonish imagination about those kinds of events. It would be a little more realistic, I think. Any other examples of where anyone had a moment of thinking, I'm surprised I'm seeing this in this movie?
I tried to watch the sequel, and I would say within 10 minutes, my reaction was, I'm surprised to see this in this movie. And it just seemed goofy and had no heart to it. I didn't give it a chance. I don't know if any of you watched it to the end. I did not.
I haven't watched it at all. In fact, I didn't even realize there was a sequel. Is it like the same characters? I mean, the same
Yeah.
actors and stuff?
I think it popped up this time last year.
Oh, it'll probably be back, won't it? Most likely, yes. I wouldn't watch it. I wouldn't even try. And it is the young boy grown up now. And it just had such a different feel from the start.
Yeah, that
I
seems like a
just was
bad
shocked.
idea.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I haven't watched it just for that reason, because after I watched it, I rewatched it again. I was like, yeah, I think they just did such a really good job with this in what they wanted to do. I thought they executed that well. And it was like, you can't like redo that. And it's just gonna like, so yeah, I don't know how it's done commercially, but I agree. I was kind of like, that's a pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first 10 minutes would confirm that, if you could make it through the first 10 minutes. So,
Yeah, I think that the characters or the actors make such a difference in the first one. Like, I don't know that I would have. Well, I'm sure any cast they put together, I would probably have said the same thing. But those characters are so, those
I think they
actors are
got
so
a lot of-
associated.
Yeah, I think that too, Ralphie and his brother are back in it, but I just, I don't, obviously I don't think the other ones are. And yeah, it just kind of was like, I don't know. Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting with this movie was the different ways they used the forced proximity trope. I loved, like, there's obviously like his world in the house. I thought, that was obviously very kind of self-contained, and obviously school. But then as I watched it this time, I realized that whole alleyway was another example of it with the bully, like we had just talked about. And I hadn't kind of thought about that before as another way to like add conflict of, having to run that gauntlet twice a day. So that was interesting to just kind of see, okay, different ways of showing forced proximity with Ralphie's world. And that was just kind of like, I always like to see how forced proximity is done in stories to kind of create tension. And that was just kind of interesting to me to see that part. And like one way they did that was like, the dad battling the furnace. That was like, I thought, really, and then with the dogs. And so, yeah, they definitely use force and being winter and stuff like that. So yeah, they definitely used that, I thought, to good effect to figure out some things. The other thing I thought was interesting when I watched it is I realized, like the parade and Christmas scene and stuff like that. I'm like, and the department store scene, these aren't CGI. Like they actually had to do it.
Yeah.
So it just kind of made me
Nostalgic.
yes, in a way. I'm like, wow, they actually somebody went through all this work to recreate, this kind of time period. And so that was just thinking of today, I'm sure that would not have happened,
Yeah.
I thought it was the thing about the lamp with made out of the leg, which I thought was funny, but I feel like it didn't fit with the movie. Like, I don't know, like why didn't they have him win some sort of a prize that was like Christmas related, that had something to do with the rest of the story? Like it's just a lamp with a leg, and and they ended up putting the Christmas tree right where that lamp would have been anyway. So it could have even been, well, like we can't have it up because that's where the Christmas tree is going to go. Right, there could have been something, but instead it was just a funny lamp.
Well, some of those things, I wonder if, Gene Shepherd's writing away and he thinks about the time his dad won, maybe not a leg lamp, but something that then in his brain, he turned into a leg lamp because he thought it would be funny. Like when those things are kind of at least ostensibly memoir-esque, then I wonder if things make their way in because it really happened, or the author thinks of it as really happening. And so they're not feeling as tied to, no, everything has to like serve the story. Because he is just kind of telling it like this is what happened to me as a kid around Christmas.
My thought about the leg lamp is that the purpose of that is really to create that tension with the mom and dad. And I thought it did that well. I mean, and it's just so incongruous of like, like you said, oh, this guy went a bowling alley. So it's like really not what you're expecting in all the scenes of Ralphie when he put his hand up and
Yeah.
he's trying to like it's reminding you of like, oh, that was such a different time where now we're kind of so used to seeing body parts of people all over that probably was, like the mother's like trying to pull her hair down that people can't see and stuff like that. I think it did a good job as being this thing with the parents, the sticking point with the parents, and then the accident that it had, the watering the plant thing and stuff like that, and their little fight about that. You're out of glue, and we're out of glue, and you took, you did that on purpose.
You used up all the glue.
Yes, he used up all the glue, and he's like taping it together and things. But I think it's another great way of like, okay, it's like a MacGuffin because he always wanted to win this thing. And then that just created like this turmoil in the house at this time of year with the parents. But like, obviously they had it resolved because you could see as the story progressed, they seemed to have a better relationship than I had that I understood in the beginning. But yeah, I think that's probably why they chose something that was, or he used something that was just so, kind of strange to the time period, was to create that tension with the parents. And interesting to see like how that kind of, I liked the how it played out of the stealthiness of them.
I also like the fact that the first time I saw it, I expected the dad to be disappointed that he had gotten a leg lamp. But he would have been happy with anything. Like, I thought it was actually a very clever way of illustrating the dad's personality by having him be just as excited about the leg lamp as he would have been about the bowling alley or a check for $50,000 or anything. Like, just the fact of winning, he was just overjoyed
so
about.
thrilled that he like, this is my ribbon, my blue ribbon,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, I won something and I'm going to put it out in the window so everyone knows that I won. Like, they'll never know that he won a thing because
Right.
of the leg lamp, but it's like, I'm going to show this off because I won this thing. So I did find him to be like, even though he was like kind of gruff and grumpy, like he had some elements where he was just like, had so much joy for things. And so, so like he loved his family and, it's like he, and so like I did see like they did a good job of showing like things like that. Like he climbs in this box and he's like, oh, what is it? What is it? Oh my gosh, look, it's amazing. I was like so thrilled. The only thing that I would have done is like have some sort of a conflict between like we know what the real conflict is, but I think if she would have said, oh, but like, why don't we put it up after Christmas because the Christmas tree is gonna go right there, or something like somehow tie the two things together a little bit better.
Yeah.
They could have done the same thing. They could have had the same conflict, but tying it together with a story a little bit more.
Yeah.
It did have a very quick, for all the buildup and stuff, it was very quick that it was resolved in terms of the accident. Because I was thinking of that this time too, of like, oh, it wasn't like, in my mind before when I'd watched it, I assumed it was around longer, but it wasn't in this storyline. It was pretty soon after that it had the accident. And it was this kind of interesting, like, oh yeah, I hadn't paid attention to that detail. And it was just kind of how they needed the story to work. I think like in like saying they could have developed it, could have done it differently.
I'd forgotten too, and when he was gluing it, I thought, oh, he's going to successfully glue it together, and then she's going to be sort of back in the same boat, and they're going to have to resolve it like adults, right?
Nah.
But he didn't. It just broke. Okay, I guess it's over.
Crumpled on itself. Yes. It's very, it was interesting. I don't know if there was any truth to it, if he actually got that, like Maddie was saying, it was probably just, an artistic license thing. But it's funny that's like the thing, even though people quote the like shoot your eye out thing, I see every year that there's like gift boxes of like these little versions of the leg lamp. It's like
the soft glow of electric sex.
Yes, exactly. But I see them sold especially for what do you call like white elephant gift exchanges or like that it's still popular all these years later, little copies of that leg lamp.
Has anybody read the book that it's based on? It would be interesting to see. Like, I can also imagine a scenario where in the book it's not the leg lamp, it's just that like the prop guy went out and they said, find something really obnoxious that somebody could win as a present, and he showed up with a leg lamp.
I will say that every guy in my family, like when there's a box that says fragile, says, "Oh, it's Italian. It says fragile."
fragile.
Like, so that so like we all say that, like this many years later.
Yes. So that was Yeah, really
Well, I
good.
think that's kind of a kudos to Gene Shepherd and whoever he worked with on the screenplay, because there's just so many lines from that are quotable. And I have to say, this isn't quotable because it's not identifiable by the context, but one of my favorite moments is when Ralphie is when when he swears it's fudge, or the dad is swearing in the basement, it's some kind of nonsense. And then he does the Ovaltine thing and he goes, son of a bitch. I just think that's so funny.
Yeah.
The line that caught me this time that I didn't remember hearing before, but said so much about I think because I loved what it said so much about the family dynamics, was the dad's working on his crossword puzzles and he needs a 4-letter word for, I guess it was, the thing is Tonto, the Lone Ranger's
It's
horse's friend.
Victor. It's the Lone
Victor.
Ranger's nephew's
Yes.
horse.
Yes, yes. And then and she's like, the mother says it, and then something of the topic was great characters and
In literature.
literature.
Yeah.
literature. And it was so well done because it was just kind of like dropped in there, but yet
Yeah.
explains so much of their relation. I thought it was just, and she's
And
just
she even called it out. She goes, great characters from literature, Victor,
Yeah.
Lone Ranger's cousin's horse or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. I'm like, oh, I missed that. I really enjoyed that
Yeah, there
little.
were some subtle things in there that I
And she's
think
serving dinner, like
Yeah.
just kind of like all the things she does. It just kind of struck.
Oh, someone here grew up with red cabbage. Like I did. That was
Yeah.
like a huge thing in my family. Like
Yes.
both in my German side and also in my mom, who always said she was from Minnesota. So my dad said he was German. My mom said she was from Minnesota. And but red cabbage was like the area where they both agreed.
Yes. My father's side of the family is all from Poland, so lots of, yeah, cabbagey stuff.
But it made me make red cabbage. Like after I
Oh,
watched
yes.
it, I made red cabbage. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I still have the leftovers. I made too much. I'm gonna be having red cabbage for a while.
Well, there
Um,
were Jennifer, you had said before about the mom pulling her hair over her face about over the leg lamp. And that was another thing where there were moments that felt jarring to me. Like I'd already mentioned, my favorite part being the part where she brings milk to Randy when he's hiding under the sink, which was very subtle. And what we were just talking about with, the puzzle clue, that was very subtle. But some of the comedy became, like, the physical comedy became very broad. And especially with the mom, like, she was often doing things like, clearly she as an actress could play these more subtle parts. Like also when she puts the soap in her mouth, I thought that was nicely done. But then sometimes it gets very broad, like when she pulls her hair over her face, over the leg lamp. That started feeling very sort of over the top acting wise. And I'm guessing it's because she was directed to do that, not because she didn't know any other way of doing that. Did anyone sense that? And were there any other parts where you felt like the physical aspect of the comedy was overboard or underboard, as the case may be?
the only thing that always bothers me that would be, this would be my bathroom break equivalent for the movie, is Flick's tongue on the
Ooh.
pole.
Flagpole?
Yeah. And I just, it's just, and his like arms flailing and stuff. And when he comes back in, and I'm always kind of like,
It was so
that,
hard to watch.
yeah, I wish that one, like, I wish that could have been less. That always jars me more. I guess for some reason, I don't know why that bothers me a lot more than the blood in the bully scene. I'm just thinking about that. But it seemed like, much kind of graphic in a way that I wasn't expecting for the movie. And I always forget when I watch it how much I dislike that one scene. The only thing that kind of saves me from that is all the kids running to the window and narrating, that kid narrating all the things. Oh, now the so-and-so is showing, showing up. The two boys looking the completely other way. While everybody's at the window, I was like, okay, this helps me. But I like, actually, what the window part is always, so I always kind of wish it would be different every time that I
Yeah.
watch.
Well, I watched as his tongue was getting closer. I'm
Yeah.
like literally like this. Like I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Because even though I'd seen it so much, I'm like, like the thought of him having to pull it
Oh,
off or
I
what,
know,
like,
I
and then
know.
like,
Oh,
and then the fire department's coming. I'm like, well, what are they gonna do? Like, I guess they put a hose and like a,
yeah,
and have
yeah,
thought it out or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, but the part that made me laugh and go, oh my gosh, this is so true. Is like, so when the teacher says it's going, it'll be better if you tell the truth and you come
Right.
clean on a,
Yeah.
and he's like, well, that's not true. Like everyone knows that it's better to put off the problem till later,
Right.
or like to pretend that, hope no one ever finds out,
Mhm.
and I'm
Right.
thinking maybe that's just a guy thing, but that just seems like like that's how little boys think,
Yes.
and
And I
maybe
think
grown
that's
men.
mhm. Like we were saying, like the things that keep that movie having heart that we watch it again and again, those are really good examples of it. I think that like how they behave in like that scene where the parents say, okay, it's time for bed, Christmas Eve. And the two brothers go running up the stairs. And like it was just so perfect how Ralphie grabs his brother, pulls him down to climb over him.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Totally in your kid brain, it would. And
Yeah.
like, oh, it's so smart to stay in that world and show us that the relationships. And it was, anyway, just like little things like that. I'm like, oh, that's why we keep watching it, is because those little snippets of things remind us of family, things of family life. And, I don't know. It's just kind of like, oh, they did some good things that were not as heavy handed, and then others that were a little like, oh, that's an interesting choice.
Well,
Well, I think the fact,
I read that they had lowered the cameras down to Ralphie's eye level. So
Oh,
like in
yeah.
many of the scenes,
Ah,
you'd be looking up at the parents and
right.
looking up at the adults and looking up at the older kids
Yeah,
to give you a sense that this is from the point of view of a kid.
right.
oh,
Oh,
that's
that,
very, very cool.
yeah.
And I think the fact that there was their narration meant that they didn't have to have Ralphie like imparting more adult insights than would be appropriate for his age. Like Ralphie could in the movie could be Ralphie and acting like however old he was. And then but you had the older Ralphie providing the color commentary in a way that's very obviously set up at the beginning.
But yeah, he's really viewing it still through the kid lens, which yeah, contributes to that whole kind of feeling of it. Yeah, that's a really good point.
The one part that was sort of fantasy-esque that I did have to say I like a lot is when they go to see Santa Claus, because I just think I can't imagine. I don't remember ever going to see Santa Claus, but I do have like the classic little kid picture with me sitting in Santa Claus's lap, and it was clear that I just gotten over crying. I just think the whole Santa Claus thing is so terrifying, and I think they did such a great job of capturing like the horror of a Santa Claus visit.
Mhm. And I loved that. I thought they did a really great job of like where the parents sent the two kids off to do that, because it's like, I think would be unthinkable now, but
Yeah.
it was so, I think, of that age where there was
Yeah.
this sense of like safety and, nothing was going to happen and stuff like that. And so then it was so much better to feel their, the disconnect of like their hope and then the terror of the people of the actors playing those characters without having the lens of a parent nearby. So I think that was, but yes, I really enjoyed that. And it was kind of, I think, well done how they shot it. That one you could tell like where the camera was lower and the people were higher.
Yeah.
But great antagonists in the way of like, oh, we're going to see Santa, and you're like, wonderful. I'm going straight to the top. I'm going to tell this, I'm going to make sure I get my thing. And then it turns out he says, you'll shoot your eye out. So you're like, literally, and doesn't he do the foot too to push him down?
Yeah, the foot in the face. And then he crawls back up.
Yes,
I guess maybe that's after he's crawled
Yeah,
back
yeah.
up. But
right. Yeah.
any other tropes? Any other tropes we should be looking? I'm just looking through the list and seeing if we've so
I
there's
mean,
a best friends trope that you had called out. Oh,
yeah.
actually, before we get to that, I'm even more curious about this. Politics.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't think of politics as like necessarily political parties. I think politics is a form of like, for like family, like the politics of within the family.
Yep.
And so we already kind of talked about that. But then I also think there's like, the politics of the alley, and so we those are things we talked about. But I think it's this kind of like ways that people interact with each other in these closed systems, which I think are so important. And then the boys was what kind of also their friendship. And then I offered up when he didn't say fudge, and he offered up the other Schwartz, and so the relationship of those three boys was just kind of when you mentioned best friend also weaves into that. But yeah, I just kind of always am interested in relationships / politics in that way. So more broad than just family, but anyway, that was
How about other thoughts, Roland or Jane?
Well, as far as politics goes, like I noticed that like every one of their relationships was like calculated. Like the kids are always like, how am I like I have a different way to talk to my dad than I talk to my mom. Like it's very well like thought out, right? And like this is what I'm gonna say to my teacher. They really like think about like what am I gonna do to get past the bully? Like they're like really strategic about all of these things. Like maybe not didn't work, but politics doesn't always work. It's just like, but like they weren't just like Ralphie wasn't just living life. He was living a calculated life,
That's an excellent example because of that was, remember when he brought the fruit basket to the teacher? That's a great example of that.
Yeah. Super PAC.
Yeah.
But I do have one off the topic remark, if I can just make.
Of course.
There is a house in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, that every Christmas puts the leg lamp in the picture window. So if anybody wants to see one, there is one and clearly it's a Christmas thing anyway. But I have no astute remarks on politics. But next time I look at it, I'll look at it from that perspective and also the camera perspective. That's odd that I didn't notice that, but I never noticed it. That's great. So I'm learning a lot. I'm listening over here.
And I guess the politics we could also see with that as Maddie demonstrated with her little dog, is in that the family politics of the bunny suit, where, and then she's like, well, you only have to wear it when Aunt Clara's around or something like that.
Right?
Yeah.
That's right.
That struck me more as like, why is this happening than the leg lamp did? Because that is one of those things that I just write off to. Gene Shepherd was forced to wear a bunny suit at some point in his childhood, and he had to include it in his story. And it's so like visually funny, you let it go. But
and
like that's one I would have been an elf
name.
I'm sorry?
And some relative called him by the wrong name, and there's, because they also said they also think your name is X and it's really Y.
I missed that.
So just go with it,
Yeah.
Like we don't want to make waves.
Yeah. And I think it's like the 180-degree opposite, of what he was wanting, which was the BB gun as the symbol of independent, boyhood independence or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like horribly, but wonderfully, I loved how the bunny suit was super well done. If it had been like badly sewn, it wouldn't have gone over as well, but it was like this like so well done, it was just made it even worse.
Aunt Clara had really spent a lot of time on the bunny suit.
Exactly.
But I think it could have been an elf suit, and it would have been just as funny and more seasonal.
Yes. Yeah.
On one of the things that I was expecting and misremembered from a previous one is that poor Flick seemed to be getting the lion's share of the abuse, because he got the the tongue stuck to the flagpole, and then also he was the one who had ended up staying back so his arm could be twisted by Scott and his little enforcer. And I thought that it was going to be the other friend. I guess the other friend was the one who got beaten up by his mom because he ostensibly told him to swear, right?
I think so. I think that was Schwartz. There was
yeah, I think they should have had Schwartz be I think they should have spread around the on-scene misfortune a little more instead of having Flick always be the recipient. So I'm just go ahead.
I feel like to me, there was, even though like if you see pictures of them, Flick and Schwartz are totally different. Like I feel like in my mind they weren't differentiated enough for the movie. Like they so like I would always have to think, oh, which, like when she said Schwartz did it, I'm like, which one was Schwartz? You know, like which one
Yeah.
was Schwartz, or is he just some random kid that that we don't need to know? Like,
Right.
is this the first time? And I'm like, no, I think it's that other kid. And then it's which one was Flick? Is this the kid with the getting the arm wrenched, the same one with the tongue? Like, so I feel like they didn't do enough to like give them their own. I guess in a novel you would say like their own voice or their,
Yeah.
you know.
I wonder if they ever thought about having, well, I'm answering my question for myself if I'm saying this. I was going to say, I wonder if they ever considered having Ralphie give the little enforcer's name as the person he learned the bad word from. But I think that the whole impetus of that is like kids are willing to throw anybody under the bus to save themselves, even their good friends. So it might have felt more like justice. But on the other hand, I think justice isn't what he was going for. I think the effect was, kids are so
The arbitrariness of things.
or calculating, or
Yeah.
I think calculating, Roland, was the phrase you had used. Everything was done in a very calculated way.
Well, did they ever address, did Ralphie and Schwartz ever address that? Was there any sort of like, because could have also been like like something to Ralphie. Oh, I guess I better not just throw somebody else under the bus because look what happened.
Yeah, I think it was
That could have
almost
been
like,
that could have been a lesson.
yeah, I think a lesson, it was almost like a lesson would be anathema to the theme of the movie. Like it was sort of like the whole theme is he's never, kids never learn lessons. They just keep
Yeah.
making the same mistake over and over again.
And I think the other thing is, or the thing I didn't think of it as lessons so much as just like kids are always battling these forces that are just going to crush them every time,
Mhm.
and just the arbitrariness of being of adult decisions and kids, and that you're just the whim of fate kind of thing. Because it was like, yeah, he just I thought it was funny when you could hear him being beaten on what I do. It just kind of struck me funny. I'm like, oh, this probably happens a lot, of this kind of thing, that kind of thing about it. But yeah.
Well, I thought that they did a really good job of, in a way, sort of poking gentle fun at it. But even as an adult, it always annoys me when I hear an adult talking about a child and they're having some trauma, like somebody's, being mean to them at school or whatever. And the adult sort of treats it as, well, I wish I had problems that were that little. And I thought the movie did a really good job of making you feel these traumas that Ralphie was experiencing with the same depth of feeling, and not being patronizing about it or not undermining it, like acknowledging that this is just
Right.
as traumatic as some different kind of trauma would be for an adult. What did other people think about that?
I think that's why the movie is so popular.
Yeah.
These many years later, is it really relates to, I think that's exactly why, is it still retains that heart of what it feels to be a child, and your hope against all these forces that are kind of, trying to smush you down in the form of the BB gun kind of thing. And we can remember that and have it. Yeah. So no, I think you just said it really well, Maddie. I think that's why it's as popular as it is.
I agree.
So why don't we switch to the two questions, which are, what is something that you liked about the movie that you would want to consider modeling in your own work? And what is something that you didn't like about the movie that you would avoid modeling in your own work? And I think for me, the answer to the what I didn't like is going to be, I think it's been almost the same thing for every one of these ones we've done so far, Jennifer. And that is those moments where the tone of the story seems out of place with the surrounding tone. And it is a little hard to assess, this 1983 movie with 2023 eyes, but certainly some of those scenes that would not fly today felt jarring. But I think they may be more appropriate to the time example is these sort of exaggerated physical comedy moments that didn't seem in line with with sort of the tone. So the thing that I would want to avoid is having these disconnects between the tone and the surrounding tone, unless I was doing it for a very specific reason. And in some of those cases, I can't identify a specific reason like that in the movie that would explain to me why they did that. And then the thing that I liked about the movie is just these moments that I remember, years after having first seen it, these little moments that are so indicative of the the personality or convey a sense so economically, like when the mom is giving Randy the glass of milk under the sink, or that comment about really, who thinks that Victor is it's a key character in modern literature. So that is certainly something that I would like to model in my own work. So who else has a thought about what you would want to take, a lesson you would want to take and a lesson you wouldn't want to take from A Christmas Story?
I can go next.
Yeah.
I guess I really loved the world building, and that I would makes me want to do A Christmas Story if I could create something that, oh yeah, you really feel like you're stepping into this whole other world. So I really loved how even though there's like tons of tropes in it, like we talk about, they were used in such a specific way to this story that you didn't just feel like when I'm watching it, I like just seeing all these tropes laid bare. And then I guess the part that I is like Maddie was talking about was the tone. And I guess the thing with that would be something that we always struggle with, is like to try to keep the story on an even keel, but yet tone wise, but yet provide enough like kind of surprise or interest for the reader. And I guess I was thinking of what made me think of that was the scene where the little brother eats like a pig. And I felt like, oh, that like went on too long for
That
me.
went on way too long.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, oh, how you communicate something without overdoing it, overplaying the hand kind of thing. So there's some scenes in the movie, like we've talked about, that's like, okay, those would be good to avoid. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Cool. Roland, what do you think?
I mean, I liked how there was like quite a few little stories kind of going at the same time.
Mhm.
And I kind of like how they sort of weaved them in together. I feel like, with the exception of connecting the lamp to the rest a little bit better, I think it's not the end of the world. I thought it was like a standalone thing that was still funny. And I think they could have had one other try fail cycle for the lamp before they like had a more realistic understanding about the lamp. So I think all the stories together was good, and I liked all the subtle humor that some people will get and some people don't. What I didn't like in the movie was I felt like there was too much narration, like the voiceover, there was just too much of it. And in places where it wasn't necessary. So it felt like a lot of telling, like because like the reason you do narration is telling, right? So it can be humor too, but it's still telling. And I thought a lot of it was unnecessary, not very funny, and I think it almost felt like I think they planned it from the beginning, but it almost felt like it was added. Some of it was added later, or like, oh, here's a good place for narration. Where can we put more narration? Like that kind of stuff. And I feel like the narration went from I'm an adult telling the story of my childhood, but sometimes it's also I'm the voice of Ralphie in that story's present day.
Yep.
Without saying, and this is what I thought, it didn't, like he should have been like, so there was like almost like head hopping between the adult narrator and the child narrator.
Yeah, great point.
I wonder if there weren't any voiceovers by the young Ralphie, right? It was all, I wonder if you would have felt different if they had actually had, Peter Billingsley providing that, or if it just would have felt cumbersome. I'm guessing cumbersome.
Cumbersome, probably.
Can you think of an example where you would have rather just lifted the voiceover out entirely?
Not specifically, because like I just felt like, oh, here's more narration. Like so that just told me that there was too much when it wasn't really like, because you could see, oh, then I could see that my dad was very upset about blah blah blah, right? Something like that. I'm like, well, you can see that he's upset, or that he's bored or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
It's
my
such a
dad
good
was at
point,
the
Roland.
furnace again, like, okay, well, you can tell that he's at the furnace again because the furnace is rumbling. You can hear him yelling and
Yeah.
yeah.
Jennifer, did you
And
have
then and then the mom also said your dad's working on the furnace. So like the voiceover said something about the furnace, the mom did, and then the dad came out.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
just thinking, I think that's a great point. And I'm thinking that also it's part of it is I don't think they trusted the audience to get it without that. But an example where I think you could have removed it and it would have been just as good as when Ralphie's crying after the whole soap incident. And the tears, and and then it did intrude where I'm saying, oh, 3 streets over, Schwartz is getting his, kind of thing. But you didn't really need that because you'd heard it. And the actor did a great job of communicating, his face did such a great job of communicating his sadness and the kind of unfairness of it all. But I think that's a really great point. And it would be really interesting to hear in a commentary of the movie what the choices were made about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to read more up on trivia before our next one so I can say, well, I know that.
Especially for the next one. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's good.
Jane, what do you think? Did you pull any things you want to do, things you don't want to do from the movie?
I'm always on the lookout for single sentences that tell you so much more about a character.
Oh.
And some of them in here were pretty obvious, but they did do a lot of that where there's one action and it just tells you so much more about the character. So that would be what I liked. I didn't have anything I didn't particularly like about it. I didn't mind the narration. Maybe I wasn't looking at it with a critical enough eye, but I really, I don't have a negative.
Could you think of a couple of examples of those one line tells you so much kind of situations?
Well, when we were talking, everybody's brought up about the mother bringing the milk.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. And again, things we mentioned about the father being so excited and the whole idea, I had forgotten completely about it's from Italy. I had forgotten that line. I mean, that just says so much. I mean, about, his naivete, his education, probably all sorts of things about him, all in that one line. And I had completely forgotten about that. But
another one that makes me think of is when they blow the tire and he's so excited because he has an opportunity to beat his new record. And he's like, 4 minutes, time me. Like whatever happens in his life is exaggerated, and usually in a good way. Like he's bizarrely excited about fixing the furnace. He's bizarrely excited about getting the lamp. I think it makes him a likable character where it would have been very easy to have that be an unlikable character.
That's
And it's
true.
always
I think
fighting
so
it.
too.
Any final
Yeah.
thoughts before we wrap up?
I was so relieved, even though when Ralphie said, "Oh, fudge," but I didn't say fudge. Like I thought for sure, like I having not seen the movie, I thought the dad was going to get mad at Ralphie for knocking that, blame Ralphie for knocking that over. And I was like, "Oh no, don't blame the kid. You did it. Or it was an
Yeah.
accident. You did it, right?" And then he just was mad about the swearing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's legit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when he swears. That made it even better. Was he swearing all that? The whole scene in the car. Do you know what your son said? And what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when she asked him where he learned the word, it was
Yes,
I
yes.
couldn't really say that I
Right.
heard it 12 times a day every time Dad went
Exactly.
into the basement to fix the furnace or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we have inspired some people to go back and look at that movie again if they haven't already had their 2023 viewing.
Mhm.
And so just a quick reminder that our next event is going to be, the live events are open to the patrons of the indie author and past podcast guests. And the next one will be the 2011 movie Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. That stars Gary Oldman, Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Firth, Tom Hardy, and also a cameo by John le Carré himself. And we'll be examining the tropes of ticking time bomb, hidden identity, secrets, violence, and MacGuffin. And that will be on Sunday, January 7th, 2024 at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you're watching this on the replay and you are not yet a patron and would like to join us, please head over to patreon.com/the indie author. And that's indie with a Y. And you can explore membership options there, which start at $1 per month. So thank you, Jennifer, Roland, and Jane, for joining me for this conversation. And happy holidays to everyone. And hope to see many of you in January.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks for
It was
having me.
fun.
It was fun.
Thank
It was a
you.
lot of fun.